So here we have the teardrop. These are veterans that came home from the war that are buried here. And the statue right up there is to honor the Civil War veterans. And the inscription is not for themselves, but for their country. So I would like to recognize Tim Mabey. He went through and he cleaned all of these cemetery, the veterans' gravestones. He and a group of friends did that. So, there's over 350 veterans buried here. So that was a huge thing to do. He's also I'm not sure if he's the director of the Friends of Greenridge Cemetery, but he's on the board. So basically, what the cemetery does, they take care of the grounds, but the gravestones are taken care of by the families. So you'll see that some of these gravestones are in pretty poor condition because there's no family to take care of them anymore. So most of the veterans that we're going to be visiting are from the 77th. And the 77th was also known as the Bemis Heights Regiment. The 77th was raised by James McCain. On August 1861, he posted an invitation, he was a congressman, to his 15th congressional district to form a regiment. And what he put on that poster, that he wanted men that would protect our liberty and show that we are inspired by the holy memories of the revolutionary battles that we live on or near to. McKean became the first commanding officer of the 77th, and he petitioned the governor because the number that was assigned was 44. They assigned them as the regiments are formed, and he petitioned the governor to have it changed to the 77th to order the turning point of the American Revolution, the surrender of General Burgoyne. So he also secured property for Camp Schuyler, which was the training facility. It was formerly the Saratoga County Agricultural Society Fairgrounds on Nelson Avenue near Crescent Street, and it was named Camp Schuyler. The 77th assembled there for training. On November 23rd, the men were given new uniforms. They were sworn in by each of the company's captains, and then the 77th left Saratoga on November 28th, 1961. Now, they decided to name the regiment the Bemis Heights Regiment. And there was a controversy. How do you spell Bemis? B-E-M-U-S? B-E-M-I-S? They chose B-E-M-I-S. Well, 164 years later, we still don't know how to spell it. We spell it both ways. So the first veteran we're going to meet is Ernestine Branch. Yeah, go ahead. And you can walk around with that. You're going to love this guy. This guy has got a real personality. He was a member of the 77th. And on May 3rd, 1863, as a 19-year-old serving in the Battle of Chancellorsville, a 12-pound shell hit him. His left leg was blown off below the knee. He had injuries to his thigh and to also his left arm. He stood and began hopping and crawling to the rear. Major Nathan Babcock came by and challenged him to halt. Why was he going to the rear? Branch holds up his shortened leg and asks the major, "Is this not enough to pass a man to the rear?" So Babcock replied, "Go ahead, my friend, and do the best you can." Branch tied a shirt around his leg. Two soldiers came and helped him, and they carried him to a field hospital. While he was being carried, of course, the battle's still going on, and he is singing, "Hurrah for the red, white, and blue." Wow. They placed him on the ground and asked him if he had any words to send to his mother, because he couldn't live but for a few moments. Well, he did live. They brought him into surgery. The surgeon's there ready to cut off his leg, and he's arguing with the surgeon because he wanted to keep his knee. The surgeon cut his leg off below the knee. This was May of '63. He went to Washington, D.C. in a hospital. He was in the hospital for a year. he ended up losing his leg above the knee. And then in 1869, he came back to Saratoga and he sponsored a race. E.B. Branch hereby challenged the one-legged soldiers of New York State to a half-mile race. Prize is the gate money. 6 men already signed up and more expected. I mean, really, this guy is something else, you know? So in a statement he made in 1927, now this is his own words. Got my first wife in that good city of D.C. Got my second wife, Miss Eva Small, August 1891 at Saratoga. She was from Greenridge, Washington County. Lived with her for 8 years. She died at age 30. Left me a little girl, 21 months old. She has always been my pet and kept me, perhaps, from doing things that I did not do. He went on to marry 2 more times, worked at various jobs, at one time as a traveling salesman. And if you've ever done any work in Ancestry, you've got all those little hints, the little green leaves. 90% of them are worth nothing. But this one, somebody was doing research on the family, and the statement was, there's no records found to the marriage to his 3rd wife. So I think for census records, it was just easier to say, yeah, I'm married to her. You know. So he died in 1932. Yeah. So just a little fact about injuries. 30,000 soldiers required amputation in the Civil War. Above those, a quarter of them died due to infection. But in 1863, Middleton Goldsmith, a doctor in Kentucky, he treated 304 of his patients with bromine, and only 8 died. So in 1864, bromine became the treatment for infections. So in 1864, when Ernstine had the rest of his leg amputated, that probably is what saved him. So these are the twins, Edgar and Edwin Ham. So this is a picture of Edwin. Now, if they're identical twins, then it's also probably a picture of Edgar Ham also. But I don't really know if they were identical or not. So, and even if they're identical, there's always a little bit of a difference when you have twins. Personality does have a tendency to show through. But Edwin enlisted in Company D of the 77th. He was at the Battle of Savage Station, Virginia, on June 29th, 1862. The regiment left, and Edwin was assigned with 6 other men for a detail to bury the dead. He was captured while he was burying the dead at that battle, and he was held at Libby Prison for 3 months. He returned to his unit at Harrison Landing. At the end of the war, he joined the regular army, and for a period of 5 years. He married, he had a farm. In 1920, he died. He was living in a United States soldier's home in Washington, D.C. when he died. Edgar enlisted in the 115th. On September 15th, 1862, at Harper's Ferry, his commanding officer, General Miles, surrendered his entire army of 13,000 men to General Stonewall Jackson. Apparently, the Confederates had the upper area, and he was not in a good position. It was the largest single surrender of an army, a record that lasted until World War II. It earned the regiment the nickname the Harper's Ferry Cowards. The company was paroled and sent to Chicago to await prisoner exchange. And that took about 2 or 3 months. And then they went back and, fought for the rest of the war. But General Miles never was able to defend his decision because during the surrender ceremony, a Confederate shell went off, hit him in the leg, and he died the next day. So later in the war, Edgar was captured and spent 11 months at Anderson Prison. He mustered out with the company while at a hospital in North Carolina. He came home, he worked as a painter in Saratoga, eventually living in a home for disabled veterans, and he died in 1905. Because you really need to look at this particular monument. You'll notice the two faces there? Yeah. That's the Amesworth, Seymour Amesworth and his wife, Catherine. Whenever you're in the cemetery, just say hi. They're always watching to see who's visiting. Catherine she's the former Catherine Ham. She's the aunt of Edgar and Edwin. Seymour, a prominent Saratogian, when I say prominent, I mean rich. He held a number of patents. He designed a fan made of ostrich feathers, which was quite popular. Also, the building on Broadway, where Menges and Curtis is, that whole building is the Amesworth building. Yeah. So I wanted to see if there was any connection to the Civil War with him. He was too old for the Civil War, so I looked into his background. Maybe 1812, maybe the American Revolution, maybe the French and Indian War, nothing. But I did find a very interesting story, which is good for a cemetery. Seymour's great-grandfather, Ephraim Amesworth, was an elder in a Baptist church in Vermont. In 1811, he invited all of his friends and relatives to his church, where he gave a sermon. He gave a funeral sermon, which was a little odd because there was no body. Until the amens were said, and he immediately fell over and died.
Whoa.
A good cemetery story, right?
Really? Oh my Lord.
He was also a member of the 77th. This was kind of late in the war. It was 1865. He was traveling with the Army of the Potomac, led by General Grant. He had requested leave to go home and visit his wife and children. But the request was denied because we were coming, it was the real build-up towards the end of the war. And General Hyde said he couldn't let him go. He needed every soldier. So on March 25th, 1865, Confederate Major General John Gordon, under the direction of Robert E. Lee, attacked Fort Stedman. Initially, the Confederate attack was successful, but the Union resistance was strong, and the Confederates had to retreat. As the Confederates retreated, they continued firing. And one of those shells exploded in a Union rifle pit, and the 3 officers in that pit were instantly killed. Stephen Pierce was in that pit. So General Hyde was in the adjacent rifle pit. So when the shell exploded, he saw a boot with an ankle fly over his head, and the boot belonged to Stephen Pierce. Stephen was 38 years old. Also killed in that same Union pit with Stephen Pierce was Summer Oakley. Summer Oakley. So Summer Oakley was the other young man. Yep. We're not going to go to his gravestone. It's on that side of the cemetery. But he also was in that same Union pit with Stephen Pierce. The Battle of Stedman weakened the Confederates, and it was the final offensive action of the Army of the Northern Virginia. The war ended 15 days later. This is the gravestone of Ellen Hardin Walworth. You might know her as one of the founders of DAR. If you're involved with the battlefield, you might know her for the work that she did and getting the support and money for the Saratoga Monument, and also for the original trail markers, like the wayside signs. Well, they were like stone trail markers at the different stops through the battlefield. Her great-grandfather was in the American Revolution. He served under Captain Morgan in Saratoga. And her grandfather used to walk her through the battlefield. And that's why the battlefield and the Revolution was so important. And she started the Daughters of the American Revolution, and also the work that she did with the battlefield.
And Ellen fell in love with her stepbrother Mansfield, which apparently is legal in every state except Virginia. Now, it sounds like it should be kind of this nice romance. Unfortunately, it was not. Mansfield was an alcoholic. He had mental issues. He was abusive both physically and mentally. She left him a number of times. Every time that she left him, he would send her letters saying that he was going to kill her and kill their children. In 1873, their oldest son, Frank, who was really afraid of his father, went to New York City. He had a gun with him. He met his father in a hotel room, and he shot his father 4 times. Then he went down to the hotel clerk and said, "Please call the police. I've just shot my father." He was arrested. He was put into jail. And Ellen actually went to NYU and became a lawyer. And she had the conviction changed to being mentally incompetent, and then eventually having a part.
Now, you'll notice the name is Brian. Might recognize it from the old Bryan Inn. Now, he was not in the Civil War, but since we're here, we really need to talk about him. He was a spy for the Americans during the battles of Saratoga. His original tavern was just south of the battlefield. And at that time, we were all British subjects, and both sides would come into his tavern. Well, Horatio Gates asked him to go into the British camp and get intel on how they were going to move the troops across the Hudson and what the battle plan was. He did go into Burgoyne's camp, got the information, but he was recognized. He was chased for 3 days, at one point hiding in the Hudson River. But he got that information to Horatio Gates, and that information led to eventually the winning and the surrender. He is not buried here. He is buried out in Fonda, but his son had this monument put up. And on the side of the monument, he has it inscribed, "First permanent settler and first to open a public house for visitors. An unpaid patriot who at great peril gave first and only information of Burgoyne's intended advance on Stillwater, which led to the timely preparations for the Battle of September 19th, followed by the victory on October 7th, 1777. So he's actually buried in Fonda, but I think that's really nice that his son did that for him.
What cemetery in Fonda?
I don't know. I don't know what the cemetery is. Yeah.
Do you know why he was buried in Fonda?
Well, he went to live with his other son. Yeah. So he died when he was living there. And his son had already taken over the tavern here. I mean, he had a number of sons, but the one son, but he went to live in Fonda with that son and died out there. Yeah. This is Orrin Rugg, this one here. He joined the 77th and he rose through the ranks to be a captain. After the battle in 1863 of Gettysburg, he was sent to the Elmira Depot to take care of drafted men for his regiment. Elmira was a depot where enlisted men from all over the state kind of gathered there and then went out to their different regiments. He was there for about 5 months, and then he rejoined his regiment. He was in one of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War in Spotsylvania, Virginia. On May 12, 1864, at 26 years old, and expecting his first child, he was instantly killed on the battlefield. He was buried on the battlefield, and his body was returned home and buried here after the war. Just as a note, Clara Barton was very involved with getting soldiers that died mostly in the South or different battlefields, finding them and getting them back to their families. The soldiers took to writing their names and their regiments on pieces of cloth and sewing it into their clothing so they could be identified, almost like what we have dog tags now. They kind of developed their own dog tags. In the local paper, it wrote, Orrin Rugg was wounded in the severe fight of Thursday last and is reported to have died since. He rose from the position of a sergeant and has proved himself a capable officer. Of the young men who have gone out from this village to the war, he stands among the first in private worth and patriotic zeal, and his fall will be sincerely mourned by the whole community. His unborn child was a son, and his granddaughter, Maria Rugg, in 1919, she joined the YMCA and went to France during World War I. She was the girls that were part of the YMCA. They served coffee and food at the canteens. They visited with soldiers. They visited with the injured soldiers, and they wrote letters home for the soldiers. I think that's pretty impressive. I think Orrin would be quite proud of his granddaughter. The Battle of Spotsylvania, it was the second major campaign of Grant's overland campaign. Fighting was on and off from May 8th until May 21st. Grant was trying to break the Confederate line. In the end, Grant chose to disengage and continue south. Both sides declared victory. The Confederacy declared victory because they were able to hold their defenses. The Union declared victory because the offensive continued and Lee's army suffered losses that could not be replaced. There was almost 32,000 casualties during that fighting.
These are big numbers.
Well, it was almost 700,000 people killed in the Civil War. Yeah. And just a note, in Elmira, from July of 1864 to July of 1865, Elmira became a Confederate prison. 12,000 men passed through the gates of Elmira prison. They nicknamed it Hellmira prison. 2,970 of them died, Confederate soldiers. The Confederate soldiers are buried at the Woodland National Cemetery, which is located in Elmira. And the Confederate gravestones, the ones we've seen here, are the rounded tops. Confederate gravestones are pointed. Looks almost exactly the same, but they have a pointed top. Apparently the Confederates said, that's so a Yankee can't sit on the gravestone. This is the Bachelor Mausoleum. You might know the name because of the Bachelor Mansion just down the street here. George and his wife Catherine and their daughter Kate are buried here. It's in the style of a mastaba, which is an ancient Grecian tomb. He was stationed in Egypt for 10 years. In August of 1862, George raised a company of volunteers for the 115th. This was the same 115th that ended up surrendering the entire army. He was mustered in as lieutenant colonel, rising to the rank of brigadier general. He was one of the officers that was chosen to accompany the body of President Lincoln from Washington to Illinois. Now, General Grant visited Saratoga in July of 1865 to attend a performance at the Leland Opera House that was located in the courtyard of the Grand Union Hotel. And then in July of 1874, he attended a ball in his honor at the mansion. And at the end, one of the rooms is the Ulysses S. Grant room. So I'm not sure if it's the room he actually stayed in, but you know, they could take whatever license they want there. So just a little bit about Grant, since we're in Saratoga, and he loved horses. Grant was not the best student at West Point, but he was the best horseman. One of his last war horses was Cincinnati. This was the horse that Grant rode to the surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. After the war, Cincinnati joined Grant in Washington, D.C., and it was eventually retired to a farm in Maryland. Cincinnati lived to the age of 18. Cincinnati was the son of one of the greatest horses that ever lived, Lexington. So if you ever read the book Horse, that's about Lexington and the history of Lexington, and then there's also a book called Lexington. The Grant Memorial in D.C., Grant is astride Cincinnati. And then in August 4th, of course, he was up here to write his memoirs in 1885, where he wrote his memoirs at McGregor Mountain, which is Grant Cottage. He died at the end of July. His body was transported down from McGregor through Saratoga. The track actually closed the day his body came down on August 4th, 1885. Okay, this unfortunate stone here, we've lost the top of it at some point, is Windsor Brown French. Windsor was born in 1832. He was a skilled violinist, and he financed his studies at Tufts College by teaching music. He studied law, and he came back to Saratoga to practice law. In 1861, when Lincoln put out the request for troops, and local Congressman James McKean answered that call, there were recruiting meetings all through the county. Windsor had no plans to enlist, but he went to a meeting held at the Wilton Town Hall. And somebody from the back said, if Windsor enlists, then we will enlist. So 12 people at that meeting enlisted. He was mustered in as a captain. When they left to the 77th, when they left the camp, the 77th left the camp, the women from Wilton gave Captain French a flag that said, the Wilton boy, gave him a handmade flag. And Captain French said to the women, the Wilton boys will stand by that flag to the last man. They went on for many major battles. The commander of the units of the 77th was James McKean. About halfway through the 3-year enlistment period, McKean caught typhoid fever. And he unfortunately never really recovered from it, so he had to leave his regiment. And French became the commander of the 77th. After he returned to Saratoga, he reopened his law practice. He was elected district attorney of Saratoga County. He also served as a member of the GAR, which was the Grand Army of the Republic, kind of an organization of VFW, that type of thing, where men could join and talk about their war experiences or not talk about their war experience, but just have shared experiences. After the war, the 77th continued to meet for, oh, the two pictures, the two of them. Meet for meetings, that's Windsor. And the 77th saved money for a monument to honor the 77th. And that monument used to be in the middle of Broadway, outside of Congress Park. That's where it was originally located. Apparently horses and carriages, the horses were smart enough to avoid it. But once we started driving cars, and I'm going to say men, sorry, most men were driving them, couldn't quite make it around that monument. So they had to move it into Congress Park in 1921.
And then it was vandalized.
Yeah. It was vandalized a couple of years ago when they were tearing down all of the different monuments. Somebody took a rope and pulled them down. Now, it's a generic person. It's not Windsor up there, even though it does look like Windsor. It's not him. So they were able to look in the catalog and be able to recreate him. But he's back up. He looks beautiful now. So this is Captain Luther Wheeler. He was 21 years old when he enlisted. His mother was very against him volunteering. But Luther said to his mother, "You must give me up, as I have given myself up." During the war, he wrote many letters home to his mother and his brother. The ones to his mother were just what a mother would want to hear. I am well, I'm gaining weight, I'm eating, I'm not sleeping on the ground, we have a little stove in our tent, I'm warm. But then in 1863, the tone of his letters started to change. January 2nd, he wrote, "I look on death with no fear. The passage from life to death seems so easy and is so common in the life of a soldier." And April 1st, a letter to his mother, "I almost tremble when I think of the future, the bloody battles we must pass through and perhaps die. It is not for myself I care, but for my friends and those who love me. If none cared for me, the future would not trouble me." In May, Luther was not feeling well. Lieutenant Van Dyke, a friend of Luther, said he needed to go to the hospital. But Luther said no. He refused. "I do not want my men to go where I do not go myself." And then he said to Lieutenant Van Denmark, "I know that I will be killed in the next battle. You will never see me again." The last letter he wrote to his mother in May of 1863, he told her he had a cold. At the crest of Telegraph Hill during the Second Battle of Fredericksburg on May 4th, 1863, his commanding officer ordered the regiment to advance across the river. Luther stood up and a musket ball hit him right below the belt. He fell and he was carried behind the line to the hospital. A telegraph was sent to Saratoga. I don't know what the wording on that telegraph said, but it gave the impression that Luther was coming home. So at Saratoga at the train station, there was a crowd there to welcome an injured Luther home. His coffin was taken off the train. His funeral was held at the Baptist church. His body was transported down Broadway. The hearse was drawn by 4 gray horses. Nearly the whole population lined the streets of Saratoga. They followed to this cemetery. There were 3,000 people here. Colonel McKean offered these final words: "My heroic young friend, you have not died in vain. The flag of your country is going on to victory. The dear country for which you paid the price of your precious life shall be saved. No, you have not died in vain." Right next to Luther is his mother, Abigail. She's buried right next to him. And here is William Wheeler. This is Luther's younger brother. So Abigail lost a son in the Civil War. And she lost another son due to the suffering that this gentleman endured at Andersonville prison. The inscription was a great sufferer from confinement in the rebel prison in 1864 and was the final cause of his death. He died at 58 years old in 1904. So he suffered his entire life from what he endured in that prison in Andersonville. Andersonville was one of the most atrocious prisons in the Civil War. 45,000 Union soldiers passed through the gates. 13,000 of them died. The commandant of the prison, Henry Wirtz, was one of only 4 Confederates that were executed for war crimes. It was during the Battle of Cold Harbor that I believe William was captured. I'm not 100% sure. But it was one of the final battles of Grant's overland campaign. Thousands of Union soldiers were killed or wounded because Grant did a frontal assault against the positions of Robert E. Lee. The action caused intense criticisms of Grant's battle plan. So he was given the nickname of Butcher for having such high casualty rates. So that is William Wheeler. You can show Lattimore. We're not going to go to William Lattimore's grave because it's way down there. But I want to talk about William Lattimore. He was an African American, very light-skinned. But the story starts with William's grandfather, Benjamin Lattimore. Benjamin was born a freeman in 1761 in Weatherfield, Connecticut. He was a very light-skinned black man. And in September 1776, he enlisted in the Continental Army. He served in the 5th New York Regiment. He served in the Battle of Manhattan and was captured. He was made a house slave in New York City by the British. The Americans came in and he was freed and he went back to his regiment. In the 1790s, Benjamin moved to Albany, where he started a business hauling cargo and trash. He was financially successful and built a house in Albany. He was involved in the black community with establishing churches and schools, and was very involved in the Underground Railroad. His son, Benjamin Jr., moved to Moreau and bought a farm, an apple orchard, in 1847. That farm is now the Candy Cane Farm. When Benjamin owned the property, it is believed to also be an Underground Railroad stop. In 1761, when the call went out for volunteers, William Lattimore had been living in Moreau for 14 years. He had gone to school with his white neighbors, gone to church with his white neighbors. He enlisted in the 77th. He was injured and he was mustered out, and then he recovered. He enlisted again in 1863 and then was discharged in 1865. After the war, he worked in New York City, William did, but in 1873 he came back after his father died to take care of the farm and to take care of his mother and sisters. For the rest of his life, you can see that picture. That's a GAR picture for William.
That one?
Yeah, that one. No, that one. Did you already? No, that's the next one. That one, you showed that one already, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a GAR picture.
Right.
And he participated in every encampment and reunion, and he often served as an officer of the association. Okay, this is the grave of T.H. Sands Pendington. First, I want to explain about the name. T.H. Sands Thomas was 4 years old when his mother, Sarah Blackstone Sands, died at the age of 31. She asked her friend, James Pendington, to adopt her son. James Pendington has a very interesting history. He escaped slavery in 1827 when he was 19 years old. He was illiterate. But just 10 years later, he had gone to Yale, he was ordained as a minister, and he was traveling all over the world as an anti-slavery advocate. He was so well respected by European audiences that the University of Heidelberg awarded him an honorary degree, making him the first person of African descent to receive such a degree. He adopted Thomas, and so we have the name Pendington at the end. Before the war, Thomas was an apprentice to Dr. Thomas Elkins, a prominent free black physician in Albany, New York. When he enlisted in 1863 in the 20th U.S., it was actually the colored troops. He actually enlisted in 1864. He enlisted as a hospital steward because of his medical training with the doctor. The 20th served mostly in the Gulf, New Orleans, Texas, Florida, that area. After the Civil War, Thomas returned to Saratoga. He became a highly respected pharmacist. His pharmacy was located on Broadway. It was one of the only black-owned businesses on Broadway. It is where Uncommon Grounds is now. That's where because that building burned. It's a new building, but that's basically where the location. The Albany Pharmaceutical Association stated that Mr. Pendington is well and favorably known in this community as an experienced and accomplished pharmacist. We cordially commend his establishment to visitors in Saratoga as worthy of every confidence. So he had white customers and black customers in his pharmacy. He was very well respected in Saratoga. So this is William Tabor. He was in the 77th. He was wounded in May of 1864 at the Battle of Spotsylvania, and then he was killed October 19th, 1864, in the Battle of Cedar Creek. The Battle of Cedar Creek was a Union victory. The battle was fought in the Shenandoah Valley. It resulted in the Union forces led by General Philip Sheridan repelling a surprise Confederate attack by General Early. The Union victory ended any hope for further Confederate offensives in the valley, and it cut off supplies that the valley was producing for Lee. The winning of this battle, Cedar Creek, aided President Abraham Lincoln's re-election. The picture of the four, Luther and Orrin Rugg are the two officers seated. We've already talked about them. The other two officers are Martin Lennon and John Belding. They were both killed with William Tabor in the Battle of Cedar Creek in 1864. So just to give you an idea of that one battle, out of 31,000 Union forces, 5,665 were killed, wounded, or captured, or missing. The Confederates lost 2,900 out of a force of 21,000. So this is the gravestone of David Price. He served in the 54 Massachusetts Regiment Company G. It was the first regiment after the Emancipation Proclamation of all black soldiers. It was black soldiers and white officers. He enlisted on April 9th, 1863, and he fought at Fort Wagner, South Carolina. If you've seen the movie Glory, you have seen this battle. Of the 600 men in the 54th, 280 were either killed, wounded, or captured. In the movie, the commanding officer, Colonel Shaw, was played by Matthew Broderick. Shaw died during that battle. A commission was requested for the Robert Shaw Memorial. It's called Gloria. Well, it's the Robert Shaw Memorial, but it depicts that particular battle. It's actually located in Boston Commons, but you can go out up to Augustus St. Gaudens's house in New Hampshire and see it. If you look at the picture, I'll have to tell you, when I saw the sculpture, I didn't even see Robert Shaw. All I saw were the faces of those black soldiers, how determined they were. They had so much to prove. They had to prove that they were worthy, that they were brave, that they were disciplined, and that they would fight for their country. And they proved it, because after that, 180,000 black troops joined the Union.
Great movie.
Great movie, yeah. So when the 77th came home, on December 13th, 1864, there were 119 men from the 77th whose 3-year enlistment was up. They arrived in Albany at 8 a.m. on the steamboat Henrik Hudson. The train to Saratoga had already left, so they arranged for a special train. They stopped in Mechanicville and picked up the Stillwater Band, and they arrived in Saratoga at 2 p.m. There was an immense crowd waiting at the train station and in Saratoga for them. Under the direction of George Batchelor and Windsor French, they marched through Clinton and Church Streets and down Broadway to St. Nicholas Hall on Broadway. Colonel McKean gave the welcoming speech, brought them to attention, and saluted them for the last time. General French gave an account of the battles that the 77th fought in, remembered those who were lost, and then mustered out the regiment. Now, St. Nicholas Hall is very important in the fate of the next gentleman, and that is David Howland. St. Nicholas Hall on Broadway, it's gone now, but if you know where the Arcade building is, and then Impressions and Filer Street and then the cigar shop, well, St. Nicholas Hall was from the Arcade all the way over to the cigar shop. So it was a beautiful theater. If you go, you're looking down Filer Street, it's a natural theater type of thing. That building burned in 1865. It was rebuilt, but on a smaller foundation. On a smaller foundation. And that's when they brought Filer Street up to Broadway. It was rebuilt using the foundation and also the materials. I mean, that was the time of when we reused things, we just didn't throw everything away. So originally it was a congregational church, and then Abel Putnam bought it and made it the Putnam Music Hall. That burned in 1896. It was rebuilt to something that kind of looks like what's there now, the Arcade building, and then the theater part of it was called the Saratoga Music Hall. In the Arcade part of it, there were stores in the Arcade, first floor, and then there were apartments on the upper floors. On June 9th, 1902, a fire broke out. The fire began at 3 a.m., and firefighters fought the fire for 27 hours. 5 people died. One of them was David Howland. He was found with his wife, Anna. They had their arms wrapped around each other. And also found in the room was their cat. Now, the Arcade building, of course, has been rebuilt. And people who work in the present Arcade building have told me especially in hot, humid days in August, they can smell smoke. And also, every once in a while, they can feel a cat going through their ankles. And if they leave their office doors open just a little bit, the door will open a little bit more, so just enough for a cat to come through. So we should end up on a ghost story in the cemetery. That is the end. I thank you for coming.
Thank you.